hey, Taylor, you're pushing all this volume, but then you're also saying create deep, meaningful moments. That feels like maybe these things are at odds with each other in some way. So I felt like maybe that was a good topic to describe what I call the two rhythms of the marketing department and the experience that I have in terms of what it looks like to work with the best brands and the different roles we play versus they play versus great leaders play in that system.
If you're trying to scale your brand with user-generated content, but you feel stuck figuring out how to actually produce it at volume, this one's for you. On Wednesday, June the 25th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, we are holding a live workshop called the UGC Production Machine. So Adrian Austin, who is CTC's Director of Creator Content, will walk you through the exact step-by-step system that we use here at Common Thread Collective to brief and source high-performing platform-native UGC. Now, here's the exciting part. She's not just talking theory here. She's going to be building content briefs for real brands live during the session. So you'll learn how to pick the right products to seed to creators, how to write a clear brief that actually gets you the content you want, how to streamline the delivery process and stay organized, and how to test variations so that you can quickly find a winner and scale it. By the end of this workshop, you're going to walk away with the actual brief template we use and the tools and confidence to crank out high quality UGC at scale. So tickets are not on sale for this yet. Look out over the next couple of weeks for that announcement. This episode of the e-commerce playbook is brought to you by Omnisend. If you're serious about growing your brand through email and SMS marketing, Omnisend has your back. It combines powerful automation, smart segmentation, and real-time performance insights, all in a platform that's intuitive and built specifically for e-commerce. With pre-built workflows, dynamic sign-up forms, and full multi-channel capabilities, Omnisend helps brands scale without unnecessary complexity. Join over 125,000 e-commerce marketers who rely on Omnisend every day. Head to omnisend.com/CTC and start on the free plan today. That's omnisend.com/CTC. Hey folks, welcome to the e-commerce playbook podcast. I'm your host, Richard Gaffin, Director of Digital Product Strategy here at Common Thread Collective. And I'm joined, as I always am, by Taylor Holiday, our CEO here at Common Thread. Taylor, I would first point out you still have your playoff stash on your face. And I think, I mean, maybe I'll let you announce it. What happened with the Costa Mesa Yankees?
Well, we play tomorrow, so that's why.
What?
But the winning continues. One of our players won the district home run derby this weekend. And we'll now have a chance to go on to Seattle, up in your neck of the woods, to compete for a chance to go to the Williamsport Little League World Series home run derby. And it was a great time. So the mustache magic continues.
That's right. Yeah. Well, if the mustache doesn't go with him to Seattle, like who knows what's going to happen?
It's going.
Oh, you're going?
I will get on the plane and bring it with me.
There you go. Awesome. All right, cool. Well, let's talk about, I honestly can't find a great segue from home run derby into what we're talking about today.
It's funny. What I'll actually say, I actually have one because I used the mustache as a setup for my talk at Final Loop because I felt public, like internalized pressure to explain why I had a mustache because I feel so ridiculous being this way in public. I don't want people to just think this is how I am. That's how I feel about it. Even we went to dinner, Mickey's girlfriend, so Mickey, who helps me with a lot of social content, part of our marketing team here. His girlfriend is a chef at the Lauren Hotel. And we had a wonderful dinner there on Wednesday night. And afterwards, she said to Mickey, I didn't know Taylor was so country.
That's hilarious.
So my mustache, and I have this hat from somebody on Twitter sent it to me. That's the Lone Star Trash Co. And so I was very Texased out. And I had on my Tacovas. So I was in full character.
Well, there you go. I don't know. I have a theory that as I get older, I'm just going to become more country as well. And it feels like it's sort of happening with most of my peer group. It's like you just sort of start.
Well, the city's a young person's game, you know?
Yeah,
it's all energy and night. And so you start to move out to your porch and just sit there and fade away into the distance as you get older. So I think it's natural.
Absolutely. I just moved to a place with a balcony, and that's the only thing I can think about is when's the next time I can go sit on my balcony.
Exactly.
And just stare out.
That's right.
There you go. All right. Well, let's talk about that talk that you've alluded to here, where you had to explain your mustache. You had to explain a couple of other things as well. And at that talk, as I understand it, you gave sort of a version of the D2C evolution presentation that we've discussed on this podcast and in other pieces of content before. But a question kind of came out of that I think sets up an interesting conversation. So why don't you kind of set that up for us and we can get into that.
Yeah. So Tanner Lamb, who's the CFO of Cozy Earth, one of our customers and a good friend, came up to me after the speech and he asked a really fair question. And if you haven't watched it, if you go look on our YouTube channel and you search D2C Evolution, you'll see this talk. And it's sort of a walkthrough of these different eras of D2C and a focus on what I think the next evolution is and how brands are evolving to build impactful cash flowing businesses. And one of the points that I make is that it happens through story, not iteration. There's literally a section called story, not iteration. And I talk about how Born Primitive and Bear have built these like really meaningful, substantive marketing moments that have driven disproportionate effect to the ad account. So afterwards, Tanner came up to me and said, "Hey, I feel like your message was a little bit at odds of our experience of working with CTC, where so much of what we feel like the conversation centers around is volume of creative. And so can you help to square those two ideas for me?" And I thought that this was a really fair question and something that I figured maybe more people are sort of like, "Hey, Taylor, you're pushing all this volume, 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 but then you're also saying create deep, meaningful moments." It feels like maybe these things are at odds with each other in some way. So felt like maybe that was a good topic to describe what I call the two rhythms of the marketing department and the experience that I have in terms of what it looks like to work with the best brands and the different roles we play versus they play versus great leaders play in that system.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk about that, because I think this has been an ongoing conversation over like the 7 years I've been here now, of the sort of need to balance the creative, the deep, meaningful part, the story, with the volume requirement of the platform. And oftentimes when you start focusing on, hey, let's tell a deep, meaningful story, all of a sudden the creative department gets really excited about that. Everybody starts developing deep, meaningful stories, and then nobody produces ads. And I think what we want to figure out here, or what I'm interested to hear from you then, is what is the balance? When do you focus on one? When do you focus on the other? What are the kind of the context in which both, or what you need to focus on one or the other?
Yeah. So I want us to have a visual in our head as we talk about this. So if we go back to the idea of four peaks theory, right? And maybe Corey, with your fancy editing skills, you can pull up sort of the graphic that we'll use a lot to illustrate this, maybe even the original drawing video. There's a screenshot here. And what you see is, imagine a line that looks sort of like an EKG, which there are peaks and troughs, right? There are peaks, valleys, peaks, valleys, peaks, valleys. So in other words, it's not perpetual peaking. It's not every day tell an incredible story and build this amazing moment. That is unsustainable. And it's unsustainable because the peaks take a cultivation and work that is a different pace and rhythm of the day-to-day of media buying. They are long-term planning activities. They work in cycles where you go, and they are often centered around a product development cycle, which goes from ideation to testing to refinement to manufacturing to production. They're long cycles. And so what I have experienced is that oftentimes marketing departments are sort of designed to only be able to produce one cadence, which is that there's some calendar and the work is like one cycle all the time. And it's like, whether it's every Friday we make new ads, or maybe that's the cycle, or something else. And what I really believe, and what I think what we help to enable for brands, is that there should be two rhythms inside of a marketing department done by different people on that work and behave differently. And those rhythms are, one, the sort of peak moment creation that is longer term planning, bigger ideas, model breaking moments, we would call them. And then two is the evergreen, always on production that is required to build and drive the underlying growth engine of the system. And so those are two different things. Now, what I'll say is both actually have volume as a portion of the delivery and distribution of that thing. So volume, just because there's a moment, doesn't mean that it requires less. It's still, there's a consideration for how do we do volume within the context of the moment. But these are behavioral patterns that are different. And a couple episodes ago, when I did the solo episode, Richard, I talked about how I actually was praising George from Cozy Earth because he had sort of embraced that idea to say, I'm going to go be the model breaking moment person and leader, and I'm going to trust CTC and alongside their internal team that are responsible for the channels to handle that day-to-day volume evergreen cycle. And so he sort of started to bifurcate those rhythms in a way that I think begins to make sense.
Mm-hmm. Still juggling multiple tools for email, SMS, and push marketing? Omnisend brings them all together in one powerful platform built for e-commerce. You can launch pre-built automation workflows, build audience segments based on shopping behavior, and even gamify your sign-up forms without spending weeks learning the tool. It just works, and it's built to scale with you. Every account starts on a free plan, and unlike other platforms, Omnisend gives you 24/7 human support no matter your tier. Check it out at omnisend.com/CTC or click the link in the description. Okay, so let's talk then about, you had mentioned sort of like the need for volume that comes from these marketing moments as well, or like rather a marketing moment is more about frequency and not about volume, I guess. So talk about how then those two, maybe those, what I'm saying is, how do those two cadences then come to interact? Because you create the marketing moment, let's say for a brand, it's Father's Day or whatever. You spent 3-4 months planning that out, making sure that the story is there, seeding the product in the way it needs to be seeded for this sort of story about fathers to come out, whatever. How does then that come to sort of land on earth with all the people creating the ads? And how do you make those things work together, I guess?
So that's a great question. So, and I want to point back to, there is a LinkedIn post from the CMO of Skull Candy where he talks about the core asset video that they had for their ANC method launch. And what he talks about in the video is he talks about how that asset serves multiple purposes. And the purpose isn't just by itself to deliver value, it's to build structure for the entirety of the campaign. Okay. So the way that I think about, so we're going to talk right now about the bigger moment rhythm. Okay. The moment rhythm, and we could use an example of, the Born Primitive D-Day shoe drop or whatever. Right.
Mhm.
So if you think about everything that goes into planning the D-Day shoe launch, right? There's product design. You have to get a sample. So there's a whole product life cycle of production that underpins this, right? And then on top of that, there's all these marketing components of the relationship with the charities that were funding the mechanism for Normandy. There's assets and photos that they produced of all the veterans. So there's all this sort of collateral development. There's a core video asset that sort of, think of it as the campaign hero piece, okay? And none of that has anything to do with direct response advertising in the ad account, right? So our job and what we want to receive, and why I use that reference to the Skull Candy video, is the best thing you could provide to the team that's working in our rhythm is like a campaign brief that has the structured assets. Here's the font colors, logos, timing, etc. The underlying raw asset library, the product, the offer, this whole system. And then we're going to take that now, and now we're going to go into the volume component, which is we're still going to apply meta best practices to create as much diverse creative volume as we can that accesses the right placement. So we're going to have 9x16 with sound on. We're going to have 1x1. We're going to have static image. We're going to have carousel. We're going to have lots of different form factors of communicating the same story. But you've given me the building blocks to produce volume. So that initial work is what I think creative directors and marketing leaders are responsible for designing. At Kalo, we used to do these in the form, and I've shared a couple of these on Twitter before. Maybe we can surface a few of them. We'd call them campaign briefs. It's like, here's the visual hierarchy, here's the fonts, here's the messaging, here's the products, here's the assets. I heard the marketing operators talk about this in a similar way, but that document, the compilation of that is a long-term process. It might take a month or months to produce it, and you get it done ahead of time, and it's handed into a system that now is going to take it in turn and is good at churning assets in this iterative fashion. Mm-hmm. But they're iterating on an underlying story that exists already and a set of raw materials that have been shot and provided ahead of time.
Yeah. So talk to me then about, because you had alluded to the creative director or the CMO or whoever being the person producing these campaign briefs, but dig a little deeper maybe into the team structure, or who the person actually, like in practicality, who is actually producing these campaign briefs?
Yeah. So it's a great question. Yeah. So it happens in my experience in two different ways. There's either a CEO, so again, let's go to the Born Primitive example, whose disposition as a leader is towards product and story, and they know the brand, and it's encapsulated in them in many ways, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the Bear example. Bear is the only person who could dream up and execute and design the D-Day initiative. Now, he's going to partner with a set of creative leaders. This could be a creative director. This could be a designer. This could be a product leader, depending on the organization, to sort of build the visual equity that surrounds the idea. But you could swap Bear out for CMO or marketing leader in that case in some organizations like Skull Candy, right? You might get to, okay, the product and partnership between Bose and Skull Candy is a function of the CEO's strategic leadership. The product design team gets involved, and then the CMO builds the story to support the product, right? So depending on the size of the organization, these things are a little bit different. But this is really where I think the key is to understand that everything I'm talking about is an internal function. And this is where I think the best relationships exist between agency and service, in my experience in the growth space, and the internal team, is that kind of work is best suited to be done by the internal organization because it's cross-functional across a lot of different departments internally, usually. It's very intimately connected to brand knowledge and customer knowledge in a way that is very personal to who you are as a business. And where we step in and where we execute incredibly well is when you can hand us that and now let us translate that into direct response execution for the sake of driving revenue on a specific day and to build that into a planning process. So that's like when I see the distinction between a growth functioning agency service provider and an internal marketing team, that's where those pieces come together in this really symbiotic way to produce the best outcomes.
Yeah. So actually, this produces a nice segue to a tweet that we've been talking about a little bit about potentially being sort of fodder for this episode, but I think it kind of connects quite nicely at this specific juncture. So this is a tweet that you put out, when was this? June 7th, so a couple of days ago. And there's a lot in here, so it's probably worth going into more depth at some point. But 2025 meta ad strategy: profit is the objective, incrementality is the measurement, creative volume is the mechanism. The metrics that matter: contribution margin in channel, incremental marginal return, number of ads launched, cost per ad launch. And then you review some steps to get there, all of which are important, I'm sure. But then at the bottom, you have small team executes this workflow, broader marketing team spends more time planning major moments and launches, which is interesting to me because the kind of upshot of the tweet, the conclusion that you come to, is all of these things being in place gives you the opportunity to actually spend more time thinking about planning these major moments. So maybe talk a little bit about
that's right. So I think this is what I would love to see. And the fundamental key, what you're describing, is if you were to take all of the internal FTEs at your team and ask the percentage allocation of their time versus tomorrow's work, okay, or the next day's work, or the iterative function of the core business, how much time is spent on the movement and execution of that versus the strategic thought of creating the next big thing, you want to redistribute that resource towards building that big idea, because that is only, my experience is that that's really hard to create externally. It's like, it's not that it can't be done, but my experience is that is an internal function. And that's where we, I think, as an example, partner so well to say, hey, like, we understand that like black leggings or, sports bras, while the big D-Day shoe moment is going on, still have to sell. And there's an email that needs to go out and ads that need to be made and budget that needs to be managed. The Google AdWords campaign needs to function. And those are all important. And you want to trust someone to execute those on a disciplined level that you can really go like, I know today my categorical search is being handled well. But if you find yourself in the minutia of analyzing your Google AdWords account constantly as a marketing leader, what's likely true is that you have left on the table the core responsibility that only you can handle, and that there's some distrust in the system about the partner that you're working with, and it's actually going to cause you to fail at your job too. And so I think that's really the more and more that I see internal organizations. How much of your time and mind share can you operate out of tomorrow? Hand someone tomorrow, hand someone the next 30 days, and you go live in 60, 90, and 120. That's, I think, the best opportunity that exists.
Okay, so let's dig into that a little bit more. Like, particularly like the psychology of getting to a place where you feel capable of thinking in 60 to 90-day windows. Part of this is a little personal advice because I definitely struggle with this. I think we all do.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, part of it is like maybe putting a system that's measuring the right things, where you have a partner that you trust to do X, Y, and Z. Of course, that's helpful. But that having the right things in place, I think, has never prevented a micromanager from micromanaging.
No.
So what are the sort of psychological tool? What are the tools you need to put in place to get to that?
I think even like you hear Ruthie Grace on the last episode, by the way, if you haven't listened to that episode with her, it's just awesome. I really enjoyed listening to it. But I think for a micromanager, and I'll even put myself a little bit in this category, and I'll tell you what helps me is that I have built an underlying system where I'm confident that there's clarity of the expectation for each person. So the goals are set. There's a place where I can see they're tracking to progress. I've designed what I call push communication that shows up to me without asking. So I know the checkpoints where I'm allowed to go and look under the hood. It's not to say that I don't ever look, but I receive that message on a proactive basis. And I know then when I have to step in, and I know the accountabilities of the leaders of people that I trust to execute. So this is when I think about like our profit system. Part of what it's intended to enable, and I think this is what I liked hearing from Ruthie, is that like we're going to make sure everybody knows the financial expectation. We're going to give you visibility to your progress against that expectation every day. You're going to receive proactively what everybody's doing in that moment. So again, you're not having to seek out and wonder. I think what happens to leaders is when they become when worry creeps in that we're not going where we're supposed to be going, and either I don't have visibility or I'm unclear on what someone's doing, then I feel this need to like dive in and go, what's happening right now? It's fear. Like that's ultimately what it is, right? And so it's funny. My kids asked me the other day. We've been watching a lot of college baseball. It's because it's the super regionals right now, and I think it's like literally the best baseball. If you're a baseball fan and you don't watch this version of college baseball, it's the best there is. And the kid was up. It was the ninth inning, and he looked really calm. And he was like, oh, like breathing really, like he just looked calm. And my kids asked, like, how do you think he's so calm? And I said, like, he's prepared. And when you're prepared for a moment, you can be calm because we used to have a mental strength or a mental coach at our college that used to say, like, when the hay's in the barn, you can be confident for the storm. Like, like you've prepared, you're aware of the moment. And I think that's a lot of what it is that when you get into the month, you have a good plan. You know the people are executing it. They're clear on what to do. You've received the metrics regularly. That it doesn't mean there's not going to be problems, but you're prepared. And so I think that's a big piece of why I care so much about this connection between the financial plan and the marketing plan. Because as a leader, if you're just giving me like marketing metrics, but I know the financial data isn't where I need it to be, I'm just going to start berating your marketing metrics, the marketing actions. I'm going to bring them under question all the time. But this like intimate connection between action, outcome that connects to the broader plan, I think that's the start. That's the start. And because if you think about that, what we're providing is this like regular 30-day window. We're giving you a 30-day plan all the time that connects to a broader 12-month plan, but really it's these cycles of 30 days where at the very least that should give you the ability as a marketing leader to pick up and move at least 30 days out. To say, okay, I can now begin to think about the next period or the period after that. Because CTC, there's a marketing calendar, every email is planned, every campaign launch, every day. As long as they do that and they get within a specific range, we're trying to get to, this within this target, I should be able to move forward and get out of this sequential interaction.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think like for me, certainly just discovering how spending an hour or two planning, like just forcing yourself out of the kind of the day-to-day thing, right? What you discover is like building that plan doesn't actually take as long as you maybe thought it did. But once it happens, everything else starts to move more quickly, right? I mean, it's the classic thing and I would recommend everybody listen to my interview with Tara from Ruthie Grace. I thought it was fascinating, and she really lays out what I think is like a super, super healthy way of communicating and a system for kind of like generating this sort of internal thing that we're talking about here. But anyway, the idea that like if you slow down to speed up, it's a cliche at this point, but it is so, so important.
It's funny, like I actually feel like, Richard, we're at this precipice for us as a marketing department of needing to do that again, right? Like we're still in this cycle of, I'd say like sometimes we can get to 2 to 3 weeks out on the podcast, or we can get to, and our industry moves really quick. But I feel like, so there's different places where it shows up all the time. But I agree. When you feel, I feel this like weight releases off of me when I know the next 2 to 3 weeks of things are already thought through. And so I can begin to think in that bigger space. And that's where you can actually make substantive changes. You can't really change the business course or trajectory this week. It's really hard to do because this week is already full. Like the way I talk about it is like, have never showed up to work on a Monday and had an empty calendar. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you need to suddenly change course, like the problem is there's so much that has to happen today that is already obligated that you can't really make those kinds of alterations at a big enough level. And so I think especially for marketing leaders, and this is why I'm passionate about our role as a partner, is we want to bring you financial clarity. We want to help you build a great plan. We want to give you confidence in the day-to-day execution in a way that you can go break the model, that you can go do the thing that you're uniquely positioned to do.
No, I would say I like that you're waving a screwdriver around while you're doing it. Just ready to get to work. Kind of fits the country look too. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, like there's people in our space that like position themselves as like fractional CMOs, and like that's not who we are. And I
Yeah.
feel very clear on this is that like we are not a CMO. That's not the role we're going to play in your organization. But we are going to be the best friend to the CMO and CFO. Like we're going to help you feel really confident that your team is going to execute at a world class level. That there's going to be connection between your departments in a way that you can build a lot of confidence around. And then you're going to go come up with freaking awesome ideas that we're going to distribute really effectively, thoughtfully, with the right allocation and measurement to make sure that it drives the results you want.
Yeah. Yeah. It does strike me that part of what we do is we slot in a partner that you can trust about those daily things that you need to get out of yourself, right? I think that's like a big part of what we offer.
That's
Is
right.
the ability to give you the opportunity to think big in the way that we're talking about.
Right.
But,
And then I think there's like this expertise around translation, which is your big idea still needs to be translated into meta best practices in creative, right? Like it still does. So just because you came up with the story, the campaign, the idea, and you've got a bunch of great raw underlying assets, there's still this execution of like, okay, how do we take that story and turn it into a bunch of diverse assets? So volume still massive, a ton of volume of high quality, diverse assets that are going to drive better outcomes leveraging the Meta ad system or the YouTube ad system or whatever it might be. And so that still is an important functional role within the context. Or how could we even, in the case of like our creator content program, take those briefs and add to the library? How could we actually get more underlying creative assets that are the right kinds of creators with the right on message presentation to help support the breadth of story around what you're doing on the campaign level? So those are all things that as that idea becomes clearer for you, we can now translate that idea into volume. We can go and make that happen.
Makes sense. All right. Anything else you want to hit on this?
Well, no, but Tanner, you got to tell us now. Did this help bring clarity to you, my friend? So I am making this piece of content just for you. So please let me know. Is that clear? Do you feel less incongruence between the CTC client experience and my talk at Final Loop? Let us know.
That's right. And anyone else who wants to hit us up and wants us to put this system in place for you, you know where to find us, commonfairco.com. Hit that hire us button. Let us know you want to chat. We'd love to talk. All right, folks. Till next time, we will see you. We'll give you another update on the Costa Mesa Yankees. I know you all are dying to hear more about what happens there. But anyway, till next time, folks. See ya.